myself as a lifelong educator, starting at the New School for Social Research, NYU, and my native New York, UVA, and FBI, the Federal Executive Institute, here in Charlottesville. I did say that I'm also an ordained rabbi, and I served as a chaplain in a federal women's prison. And I also lived in Israel for a year and a half and spent a lot of time in Egypt in the mid-'80s, before the first Intifada, and not that long after the exchange of the Sinai for diplomatic relations with Egypt, which was a very cold peace and always has been. I have more questions than one, though I'll only ask one, and hope that the conversation can continue in another break, since we're not going to have this one. And I'm going to pose this question to Ray, though I have questions for the rest of our panelists too. How did you and the other members of the flotilla anticipate the Israelis would react? And I know in this case it was the Greeks who stopped you, but you know, we know the whole. So, and I'm coming from a place of, when I lived in Israel, I was an American Jew with an Israeli visa going into Egypt. They took my passport and I had to pay hundreds of dollars to leave the airport. It took about 8 hours. And I was only able to leave because I was a finalist in a belly dancing contest, an international belly dancing contest. In Egypt, I still belly dance. I don't know if you can see my hand. I think I believe, and I think I still do, but in the mid-'80s, I think I believed that you can dance, that you have to dance peace into being. And you might remember on Friday I was wearing a t-shirt from Emma's Revolution that had peace in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. And I only got in because I was already registered in this international conference. And so my question is coming from a big context, but I'm still interested in your answer. Thank you.
Thank you, and perhaps we could have a demonstration of the belly dancing during the break. It's a very good question. Let me just start in a macro kind of way. I've been, I'm sorry?
Request a question so we can...
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, one question is, what did I expect?
How did you and the other members of the flotilla anticipate the Israelis would react?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I guess I'd just go back to what I said earlier, that, you know, it was all about doing the right thing. It was about doing good because it was good. And we didn't know what to expect. This campaign started a year before we actually set sail. The thought, and Colonel Wright can speak to this much better than I, the thought was there was no U.S. boat to Gaza the first time. There was a U.S. citizen killed. Not a dual U.S.-Turkish citizen, a U.S. citizen. I have to make that clear because everybody still makes that mistake. We've talked to the man's lawyer. He was born in the United States. He never filled out the application you need to become a Turkish citizen because he didn't want to be drafted by the Turkish army. Pretty good reason, right? So he was a full-blooded, 100% U.S. citizen. And I'd like to know how the rumor got started that, well, he wasn't really one of us, you know, his son, you know, looked like a Turk, and, you know, he was a half a Turk, you know. Yeah, half a Turk, I suppose, doesn't deserve the same protection that the United States would give to a full U.S. citizen. That's kind of a digression. We didn't know what to expect, but we knew, you know, months ahead that the Israelis were threatening, well, they were actually training their dogs, they were training their repel people, they were training all manner of people to board us and to send us back. And what was really uplifting was that of the 37 passengers that arrived in Athens to get on that ship, okay, I mean, I was almost 72. Now I am 72. I'm thinking, you know, you had a great life, McGovern. I mean, you know, what's this? You know, I'm ready to face what happens, okay? There were 22-year-old people there. There were 23-year-olds. There were people who had done more in the area of social justice than, albeit able to do for the rest of my life, you know. And I'm thinking, wow, all these people. And then we heard more and more threats. Okay? I heard directly, indirectly, but directly from the NSC that the staff of the National Security Council was quite prepared, as my source put it, quote, to see the cold-blooded corpses of American activists on evening TV in the US, if that's what it took, end quote.
Activists.
Activists, right?
Not real Americans.
Yeah, well, and just a little footnote on that. Craig Murray, the ambassador, UK ambassador to Uzbekistan, who quit because he didn't like the fact that the British and we were torturing people there or having our locals torture them. He wrote a blog and he said, you know, I know McGovern pretty well and he's usually pretty accurate, but this was over the top, you know. So I inquired through my own Foreign Office contacts, not at the White House, but at the State Department. They told me exactly the same thing. Okay, exactly the same thing. Now, what happened? What happened was this. Our president was not able to persuade Netanyahu not to do what he did the year before, where he killed 9 people. We had Alice Walker with us. We had 2 New York Times correspondents. We had 3 CBS correspondents. We had 2 CNN correspondents. We had The Nation. We had Al Jazeera represented. They were on the boat. They weren't just interviewing us. They weren't just taking our pictures. They were on the boat with us when we set sail and made a break for it, okay? Now that's what worried the top echelon of the White House more than anything else. My God, Netanyahu's gonna shoot up Alice Walker, and this will not be, you know, we'll survive, but it won't be good, okay? And so what did they do? They went to the Greeks and they said, look, if you guys need another bailout, all right, the least you can do is keep all these ships in port. And the Greeks needed another bailout. Who runs the IMF? The US does. And so they kept us in port. At least they brought us back to port. The others didn't even make a break for it. 2 of the ships were sabotaged. So what did we expect? We didn't know what to expect. We were led to expect the worst. And, you know, as I said before, you know, the outcome is not always us to up. It's not always up to us. We just try to be faithful in demonstrating that the world does care about these people in Gaza, all 1.5 million of them, that we were bringing letters from all manner of people in the United States, both to show them their support and to break the blockade. And while we were in Athens, there was a press conference in the State Department, and the State Department spokeswoman was asked 3 times, does the United States of America consider the Israeli blockade of Gaza legal? What'd she say? Anybody know? Yeah? She said, well, I don't know. I'm not an expert on the law of the sea. I don't know. And so, you know, that's how bad it was. They weren't even, well, they were too embarrassed to say what the whole world believes, namely that it's illegal. So, anyhow, it was a real experience. And in answer to your question, sorry to be so long-winded, we didn't know what to expect. We just felt that somebody needed to do that. And the real witness for me was, you know, 35 of those 38 were younger than me, and they had a lot more at stake, and they were willing to do it, and I just was very, very witnessed to by these little prophets.
Well, can you carry this microphone to people? Would you ever hear some questions?
You can also repeat the question.
Yeah, we could. Let's see, we've got a hand here. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'll be loud enough.
Okay, you can shout?
Yeah, I'll shout.
Go.
Our friends meeting about 4 years ago set up a committee called Bridging the Faith Divide to reach out and get to know our fellow local Muslim brothers and sisters. And you've sort of, as a panel, sort of touched upon this. And I'm intrigued by the fact that our label of the enemy is all Muslims as terrorists. And if that's what the label is, then there must be something that's saying we can't do, which is what we've learned from the Muslims. This is a wonderful religion. There are extremists in every religion, and we're not to demonize. And in fact, when I asked him in Amman about how do you move forward in this work, he said, for me, not to be hopeful is not to believe in Allah. Wonderful, wonderful. So we have so much to learn from this group, and our values are aligned. So I'm asking you, how do we reach out and make coalitions with this very wonderful group that's doing the same work that we're doing, and yet has been demonized? And you've talked a little bit about it, and I appreciate it. If you could say some more.
I have the immense privilege and gift that I speak Arabic, and I've been speaking Arabic and working with Arab and Muslim people for all of my professional life. My first husband was a Lebanese Christian, and 2 of my children are Arab Americans, well, sort of Arab British Americans, I guess. I'm a member of the Friends meeting here in Charlottesville, and our meeting has had a lot of, really not me, but other women in the meeting have had regular meetings with Muslim women as part of a Christian Muslim women's group here in town. And we've had quite a lot going on. Personally, I have traveled to the Middle East a lot. I lived in Lebanon for 7 years and have been traveling, that was back in the 1970s, traveled back a lot ever since then. And I've come to know people from all the major political movements in the region, in Arab countries, in Israel, in Turkey, and in Iran. One of the groups that I have gotten to know has been Hamas, who in 2005 participated in a ceasefire that was one-sided from the Palestinian point of view, from the Palestinian side. All the Palestinian groups participated in this ceasefire, which enabled, it was the only thing that enabled the Israeli settlers and troops to move out of Gaza, because of course if they had been fired upon, the withdrawal would not have occurred, and that was a decision the Israeli government wanted to undertake. They participated in that ceasefire also so that they could organize their elections in 2005, which they did in the West Bank and Gaza. Total population about 4.2 million, 1.5 million in Gaza, and the rest in the West Bank, with full support from the Bush administration, which was at that time playing with the idea of democratizing in the Middle East. And the Bush administration thought it would be good to have everybody in the Palestinian community there. And of course, we need to remember that the majority of Palestinians do not live in the occupied territories. The majority of Palestinians live in exile, so this is just a small portion of the Palestinian people. Good idea, anyway, for them to have an election after the, death or killing of Yasser Arafat. So Hamas, along with all the others, participated in good faith in the election and won it. Those were free and fair elections that took place in January of 2006. The moment the results came out, Condoleezza Rice and the Bush administration and the Israeli government went ballistic and imposed the blockade and raised the level of tension and conflict. And people talk about, Hamas in Gaza launching rockets to Israel. The amount of ordnance that Israel, even prior to 2008, was launching into Gaza was huge, and the casualties. So that's why, as a Quaker, I have felt the need to reach out and talk to these people who have been demonized in our country as Muslim extremists. As I mentioned earlier, I talked with women from Hamas. I've been to a lot of women's projects in Gaza and elsewhere. I've talked with leaders of Hamas in Damascus, including Khalid Mashal. I've talked with a lot of the leaders. One of the people I was talking to, I wanted to explore the idea of an interfaith dialogue whereby Quakers and people from Hamas, that is, people on both sides who act from a sense of spiritual leading in their work in the world, that we could share some of our experiences And as the famous Quaker thinker John Woolman said when he went out during the Franco-Indian Wars, that's what the British colonists here call them, I'm sure the Francos and the Indians call it the British Wars. He went out to meet the Indians, and he said, I'm going to go and share with them my good news, and perhaps they will hear it, but I also want to listen to what I can learn from them. Very important in an interfaith dialogue, that you go prepared to learn as well as way opens to share. So I was talking with one of the Hamas people in Gaza, in Damascus, about trying to set this up. And I said, I was trying to explain Quakerism to them. These ones had not come from Ramallah, where there's a Friends school, and they're quite familiar with Friends. These ones had come mainly from Gaza to Damascus, and I kind of explained how we do silent worship, and one of them said, well, it sounds kind of like yoga. I said, well, it's sort of like yoga. And then I said, you know, but you sit there and you listen for the word of the divine, and when it touches you, it's the most amazing feeling. And he immediately got it. He said, in his English, which was charming and quirky, he said, yes, isn't that the most amazing feeling when you are tickled by God? So, you know, I don't know, I probably haven't answered your question, but I think there are so many different ways and different levels at which we can do outreach, and the importance for outreach to Muslims has never been more important in this country. You know, the Center for American Progress really recently published a wonderful report on Islamophobia and who are the 7 major funders of Islamophobia, who are the 5 major institutions that are systematically spreading this hate doctrine. This is not a grassroots thing that is welling up. This is a doctrine that is being spread deliberately, and it's reaching into all levels of society, including the kind of training that the FBI is now giving is extremely hateful. All of these hate materials come from these 5 institutions. So I think that's something we all need to be very aware of. Go to the Center for, it's called, I think, I can give you the URL if you don't have the URL for this report on Islamophobia and how it is being spread in our society, because we need to be at the forefront of combating it.
In this connection, I'll just add that a group that Code Pink participates in is UNAC, the United National Anti-War Conference, originally the C stood for, and I was able to march in New York City with many Muslim families in a UNAC-sponsored march where really, I think through the mosques, they organized and said, it's the exact theme that keeps coming up here at this conference, if you let them intimidate you and you stay out of the public eye, out of fear, which is very understandable. If you ever were to don the hijab, you would be amazed at the amount of just sheer nastiness that would immediately ensue. And it was really exciting to march with. They brought their whole families, and they were from many different countries, so of course their cultural traditions were all different. But UNAC is a group that's doing a lot with this. For one reason, because a very good labor organizer named Joe Lombardo from the Albany, New York area was supportive of a mosque there that was targeted by these FBI entrapment schemes where they sort of go after literally slightly less, slightly not dealing with a full deck of cognitive cards, young people. The FBI will find these people in the Muslim community and kind of start luring them in. So that's one group that's working on this nationally too. I think we're at number 2. Number 3.
You've heard from a Jew and a Quaker, now it's the Mennonites. I work with the Center for Interfaith Engagement at the Eastern Mennonite Mennonite University in the Shenandoah Valley, Harrisonburg. And I don't want to turn this to a question to interfaith conflict, but I want to work with some of the earlier comments. One comment was, if we kill 1,000 Taliban and 2 civilians, it's a net loss. One was Jonathan's encouragement that we support people. We find people often on what is nominally the other side who can carry our message to the other side far better than we can, who might speak an alien language to that expressed by the other side, whether the other side is American evangelicals or Tea Partiers or what have you, and that we support them versus confrontation. The usual kind of confrontational format. I was at a meeting 10 days ago where there was an Islamophobe giving the standard speech, and some of us sort of stood up and began to ask questions. It very quickly turned confrontational. That is the usual polarizing dynamic that you see happening in American politics, and all it happens, I mean, nothing constructive happens. And so, as activists, my question is, how do we avoid polarizing confrontation? How do we go beyond that to supporting those elements on the other side who will come our way and meet with us and join with us?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a tough one. This may sound trite, but you know, the truth will set us free to the degree we can educate people, to the degree we can, in a non-threatening way, tell others who are not of our persuasion what we really believe, and not what they, you know, stereotype or what they think we believe. I think that's the only thing that can really promote dialogue. I think by the same token, there are times when, you know, confrontation is unavoidable, depending on what kind of resistance you run into. And when you have, you know, when you have war criminals you're talking to, like Rumsfeld or Chertoff or all those other folks, then you just have to state your truth without any expectation that there'd be any compromise on the other side. So, yeah, that sounds wishy-washy, but I think you could do both, depending on what the intended audience is.
I maybe have a little bit of a different answer than Ray. Maybe it's not that different, but I do also disagree with Ray about anger, just in my personal life. I have found that anger is the most destructive emotion, and the first person it destroys is the person who bears it. And therefore, I mean, I'm much more of a kind of a Buddhist from the point of view, I think, that anger, I try to subsume anger and make it into sadness, because when something is making me angry, that's not a good place to act from. But if I can say, well, I'm really sad that you feel that way, and see, you know, if somebody's speaking in a hateful way, Islamophobic or anti-Semitic or whatever, I see that as a sign of spiritual wounding, and therefore something to be sad about. So it's hard, it's a personal discipline that I continue to have to work on. But if I hear hate speech, I mean, it's very easy to kind of stand up and say, oh, that's really offensive, you know, how could you possibly think that? You're so ignorant, you haven't ever met any Muslims, you know, or whatever. Which doesn't help you. Without a better way is to say, you know, personally, I'm sorry to hear you speak like that, but tell me why you think that way. And try to draw out the, you know, what's behind the person's words and engage with them. You can even say, I hear what you say, because, you know, people always like to be heard. I hear what you say, I disagree with it, but I'm really interested why you think that way. Where did you get those ideas? It's really hard to be so grown up and not get drawn into confrontation when people are expressing hateful comments. I think the worst moment in public speaking I ever had was just in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq. And for some reason I ended up speaking in front of the Richmond World Affairs Council about Iraq. And I was saying that if there's a war, it's going to be really damaging for our country and for Iraq. And I don't think that we have the evidence and I don't think the evidence has been good. You know, I gave all the arguments that I was writing on my blog at the time, and I gave it in front of this audience, and people were so hostile to me. I mean, I guess Richmond is a big center of the military-industrial complex. I felt pinned against the wall like a butterfly. I felt stripped naked, and I felt that I had no way to come back because I had really studied the issue and felt that I had the truth and you know, that I knew what was going to happen. And sadly, I did know what was going to happen. But I was unable to connect with those people. I thought, I have to find a way in any kind of confrontation in the future that's like this, where I can come back and continue to build a human relationship. But it's hard.
We're out of time.
Oh, no, you didn't know.
Let's express our appreciation for Lisa Savage.
David Swanson has asked if I would, okay, we're going to do a 45-minute adjustment to the next item on the schedule. And the next item on the schedule will actually allow people to have more time to share their thoughts, because this is the part of the program where people can come together and plan for future actions. We have some suggestions about possible groupings, but these are not cast in stone, and the organizers of the conference would like to invite the audience to suggest other topics if you do not hear the area that you were hoping to hear. So I'm going to read you the list that was generated prior to now. Let's see. Political campaigns, such as, but not limited to, Brandon Collins, who's running as a peace and justice candidate for Charlottesville Town Council. Right? Mm-hmm. So that would be one. Petitions for resolutions, such as the mayor's Bring Our War Dollars Home resolution. We have copies of the petition for the city of Charlottesville taking up such a resolution here. And so those are available as a resource. Also, other people may want to talk about doing that in their locality. October 6th and onward in Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. Bring Our War Dollars Home. I can't read the rest of what. Oh, Maine, North Carolina, Maryland, or other locations. And then finally, I guess the war criminal Tony Blair is coming to Greensboro, so some folks are excited about giving him the greeting he deserves when he has to do that. So I'm going to take other suggestions from the group. Coleman.
September 2012, the Democratic National Convention is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 1 week later down in Florida is the Republican National Convention.
So would those be two groups, or would that be one group?
Well, let's wrap my mind around one at a time, but we're already figuring out how to engage, the party in Charlotte. And a lot of us can't be delegates. There is already rumblings and serious considerations of some major nonviolent trainings later in the spring to prepare for in general for a lot of things, but focused in that direction.
Okay, great. Thanks for that one. Yes, ma'am.
In addition to that, September 3rd through 6th in Charlotte 2012, we'll have Democracy Rising Convention as an alternative convention to the DNC, where they have their parties with their donors and their champagne and money. We will talk about how to organize resilient, sustainable communities around building justice and peace.
Right. Those two kind of go together, possibly? All right, other ideas that people would like to organize around? I know that the NATO and the G8 meeting in Chicago that's coming up in May is something that there's national organizing going on around. I don't know if there are people here that are interested in talking about that. Yes, up there.
I wonder if people who are going to be taking action in May in Chicago are aware that in 2008, NATO issued a document titled Grand Strategy for an Uncertain World, Renewing the Transatlantic Partnership. It's a rather pernicious plan, and if you search that title on the web, you will find it.
Thank you.
What is it?
It's a product of this, let's see, the Center for International and Strategic Studies.
Do I gather from that that you would be interested in talking with people about organizing around that right now when we break into groups? Okay, so I'm adding that one, NATO and G8 in Chicago in May. Any other topics? Yes?
Yeah, I thought I was the only one that was interested in the issues of the military and the environment, and it turns out that people have been talking about that all 3 of these days. If anyone would like to discuss that with me, I'd love to have a chance to just get some other ideas about the links between these two.
Super, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, now, Ray?
I just wanted to add a footnote. I'm not one of the organizers of the October 6th Tahrir Square in Washington, but I know that many people coming are bringing tents and so forth. Like Colleen Riley's got 2 buses loaded up already, and their tents are getting dried out in their backyards and so forth. Leave them there? Oh, okay. Well, here's one of the organizers. There's not going to be any tenting.
Yes, tenting and sleeping and eating.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood you. I thought you were saying leave the tents there. No. Bring tents.
Sleeping in the square.
Yeah, we're going to do what the people in Cairo did. We're going to be there. It's easy for me to say because I'm not very far to travel, but we're going to stay there, and we are bringing tents. And I just want to clarify that. It'll be pretty nice. It's really nice in Washington early October and late October, and actually November is not bad either. And sometimes it's nice until Christmas.